Hello, it's me, Kyle. Welcome back to Give Pause Hobby for the fourth installment, well, I guess the fifth, but the fourth faction from the original Clockwork expansion. And I can't tell you how excited I am to be returning to the last of the Clockwork teaches. So that means up next is going to be uncharted territory. We will be going into Clockwork 2, and yeah, very excited to, I've been playing with these on Tabletop Simulator, and they are a ton of fun, and yeah, hopefully we'll be playing with them in the meat space in the not too distant future. And until then, let's focus on the things you've already got. So today we're talking all about the Vagabot, but real quick, a reminder, the Klingon subtitles, if there's something that I miss, I will try putting it in there. If there's something that's really big that I made a huge mistake on, I'll make an episode, whatever this is, I think 5, like 5.1 or 5.2. I hopefully won't have to do anything like that because that would be embarrassing. But, you know, mistakes happen and brains can be great, but sometimes mouths have their own minds on things. So with that, let's dive in to see what this little rambunctious goofball is all about. So first up, Vagabot, solid name, gets right to the core of things. It is a bot that is a vagabond. End. Overview from the law of rootbotics. The Vagabot makes for a capricious friend or foe. Like a human player, he will reward those who craft items. But be careful, he can make for a dangerous enemy once he gets enough items to boost his maximum hits. And you're saying, what on earth does that mean? And I'm saying, I will tell you. So, up first, faction rules and abilities. So, we have poor manual dexterity and hates surprises, as per usual, at least when it applies, because remember, hate surprises didn't need to be printed on Automated Alliance because they didn't attack. The Vagabot will attack. So some of the new stuff that he has, Lone Wanderer, Pawn is not a warrior and cannot be removed from the map. So that's like the human version of the Vagabond. However, if an effect would remove all enemy pieces, like an Alliance Revolt, instead damage 3 of the bot's items. So that comes into play every so often, important to know. Next up, Nimble. Also, just like the regular Vagabond, they can always move regardless of who rules the origin or destination clearing. Super simple. Next up, there's a number of rules that aren't necessarily up at like the berries part of the board. Character cards. So in addition to difficulty and trait cards, you're going to have these adorable character cards that are going to be kind of based off of at least like the idea or the feel of some regular human-controlled Vagabond characters, but they're totally different. They're specific just to the Vagabot, and we will get to those in just a little bit when we get to setup. Items. So just like the Vagabond, the Vagabot will be exhausting items, flipping them over to the darkened side, to take actions. However, unlike the human Vagabond, the items don't actually matter. So taking items, you don't necessarily need to randomize the items in the ruins. When you're taking starting items, we'll talk about that in a little bit, you just grab items from the bag. You don't need to match them because it does not matter. You don't need it to exhaust a sword for battle. You can exhaust whatever. It's just a count of how many actions that they actually have. So kind of a big change there, but that would just be a nightmare if you had to keep track of all that stuff. So good news, you don't. Speaking of, earlier talked about bonus hits or whatever it said in the overview, the battle track right here, in the regular Vagabond, your maximum number of hits is determined by the number of swords you have. In this case, your sixth, well, first of all, your maximum hit starts at 1, just basic. So there's never a point where the Vagabot is toothless, like human Vagabond players can be at the beginning, and actually sometimes you can purposefully make it that way so you actually don't trigger infamy. They will always have at least one tooth. Then as soon as they acquire their 6th item, they will place an item here in the battle track. And then same thing for the 9th and the 12th item. So these items, once they're in the battle track, they will stay up there until if they damage enough items that the total number of items in the satchel and the battle track is lower than, you know, like say they put their 2nd one on here because they just got 9 items. Well, as soon as they get an item damaged and it goes down here, they no longer have 9 items. So this one used to be the 9th and now it's the 8th. So it comes back down to the satchel. At which point it can be damaged and flipped over for abilities and stuff. As long as it's in the satchel, it is untouchable. And because of that, part of the rule says as soon as they gain their 9th item from whatever, whether aiding, whether exploring our ruins, whatever, or crafting, the 9th item, you know, combining battle track and satchel items will trigger something going to this battle track. It does not necessarily need to be the new one though. If they already have an exhausted item, so it's flipped over, they will push exhausted items up here in like first priority, because that's being the most efficient, right? It doesn't matter that it's exhausted in the battle track, it just needs to hold up a space. And then, you know, starts with maximum hits of 1, goes to 2, 3, and then as attacker, deal 1 extra hit. So they can do the maximum of 3 on the die, but then whatever they roll, they get an extra 1 after that. So, you know, items don't need to be a certain item to take actions. And as soon as you get your 6th, 9th, or 12th item in the satchel and battle track combined, not including damaged items, you put an item up here and they become that much more dangerous. And then last but not least, taking hits. So again, just like the human Vagabot or Vagabond, since they're lone warrior, there are not warriors to be removed due to taking hits in battle. Instead, you're going to be moving items down from the satchel to the damage box. And again, that may affect your battle track up here. Just like when we talk about moving exhausted items up to the battle track first, the Vagabot will move exhausted items to the damage track in top priority. Again, for the same reason, you move exhausted items to the place where it doesn't matter whether it's exhausted or not, because then that leaves unexhausted items to be used for actions. So for every hit they take, they have to move something down. If they have any exhausted items on the darkened side, those will go first. And those are the rules. Now, this is, you know, as you can see by the size of the text, this has like the most going on, I think, of all the factions, but that's because each one of these things has its own like little mini rules block, and to make it fit, they had to kind of drop the text size. Once you understand roughly like how these work, we'll talk about this, it's not actually too bad. And because it's just the one thing, you're not, you know, moving a whole bunch of warriors, you're not recruiting and all that stuff, it's actually relatively simple to kind of keep tabs on and to keep a hold of when you're just piloting it. So you don't need to put a ton of, I mean, again, I've said it before, the goal of all these Clockwork factions is not to be spending a ton of time on them. And I think once you get used to the layout and the flow of the Vagabot, that one holds true to that ideal. So let's get to the setup and get started. But first of all, choose character. So these, as I said before, are different than the human-controlled characters, and they are roughly in difficulty order of Thief being easy, Tinker being moderate, and Ranger being the hardest of them. Now again, this is in addition to trait and difficulty cards. Those also exist, but this gives the Vagabot an additional like flavor profile, because for the Thief, the easiest one, For all of them, they have a special rule at the bottom: steal, day labor, and hideout. And these rules will take place whenever the Vagabot's turn tells them to do their special action. So it'll just say special, and then it'll actually, refer to this. And I'm told that there are also going to be more Vagabot characters in Clockwork 2. So if you are watching this in the future, there will probably be a little addendum video that talks about the new characters, which should not be nearly as long as this video is going to be. So Thief, being the easiest one, steal. Take a random card from the enemy in your clearing with the most points there, then the most pieces there. So taking a random card, just kind of stealing from their hand. Now, if this is up against another bot, remember bots don't have hands, so and when this talks about stealing a card, it's doing nothing with the card aside from sending it to the discard and taking a victory point. And if it's with another robot in the clearing, it just gets a victory point for it. Day labor. Search the discard pile. Oh, this is for the Tinker. Search the discard pile for the top card with an available item and craft it, scoring 1 victory point. So if there's ever anything discarded for any other effect, so the bots weren't able to craft it, or human players weren't, and it's just sitting there in the discard pile, Tinker is going to be able to pull that out and make it, an item they can use. They do start the game with 1 fewer item, though. So they start 1 item behind, because chances are they're going to get back up in time, no problem. And last but not least, last but most, the most difficult, Ranger, their ability Hideout. If you have 3 or more damaged items, slip into a random adjacent forest. And we'll cover that later as to why that makes that the most challenging of the characters, because it does. So yeah, your character card is going to go right here on the player board, so you can remember what's going on. Next up, place your pawn. So there's only 1 item or one piece to go on the board. And remember, you're going to put it in the forest adjacent to the most clearings. And if tied, randomly decide. If you're like me, you'll need a reminder that the autumn map, the river, does not split forests. It's unlike the raging river in the winter. The autumn map, the river is just there for looking nice and for the otters to use for their different things. So there is 1 forest that, absolutely breaks the tie for, I think it has 5 adjacent clearings. So you put them there, but if there is a tie, you just roll the die or something like that. Get quests. Shuffle quest cards, the bot will use those, and place it face up near the board. So shuffle quest cards, put the stack there, draw 1 face up. So they'll only ever have 1 card, and we'll get to how they do that in a second. Populate ruins. Again, all the R items put into play, and it does not matter, you don't need to take time to pretend to shuffle them and everything, because it doesn't matter unless there's someone else, a human player who's playing, whether the Vagabond or the Lord of the Hundreds, that actually use the items, because it's just 1 more item unit for the bot to use. And then take starting items. Any items that have the S next to it, doesn't matter what they are, because they'll all work just fine. And then we're ready to play. So let's get to the side column here. For Birdsong, first 2 you should be prepared for. 1, reveal an order card. 2, craft an order card for 1 victory point if there is an available item in the supply to be crafted. And 3rd, slip. If you have 2 or fewer undamaged items, move to a random adjacent forest, then go to evening. You just skip all of daylight. And that's it. That's all Birdsong is. So moving on to daylight, first of all, before we even get to these actions, let's take a tour over here, the daylight action little layout. So this is where the order card is going to come into play. Depending on what suit it is, the Vagabot will be taking 3 or 4 different actions as it goes through the day, which means there will be some days where they won't quest, some days where they won't explore. They will always have battle as part of their day, and since they start with at least one hit able, the Vagabot is always going to be threatening violence, which is not the case for some, human vagabond strategies, but it is for the bot. So you'll draw a card. If it's a fox, you will explore, battle, special, end of turn. If at the end of here you have extra cards, extra items, so be it. They stay face up to potentially use more of them next time. And sometimes there will be actions that will use more than one of these, and we'll cover that in a second, obviously. So real quick, before we get to the actual actions themselves, moving. So when you are taking actions in daylight, there will be times where it may prompt you to go do an action in the nearest clearing. If you can take the action without moving, so as in like there's a battle waiting for you in the clearing you're at, great. You don't need to do anything. You're already there. Go right to the action. However, if the bot can't, if it needs to go 1 or 2 or 3 spaces away, exhaust one item per move in the way that exhausts the fewest items. And you move even if you don't have enough unexhausted items to take the action after moving. So if its last action is battle, like in the bird, on a bird day, battle is the last thing it's going to do. If the closest battle is 2 clearings away and they only have 2 unexhausted items, it will spend each of those items to move, even though that means they'll get to the clearing and have nothing else left to do. Now, hopefully most human players wouldn't set themselves up for something like that, but sometimes the bot does. So yeah, that isn't on the board anywhere. That's just in the law of rootbotics. It's just baked into here. Whenever it says nearest clearing, that's what it's talking about. So you're going to take actions ordered in daylight actions, the little thing up here. Let's talk about what those actions are. First of all, explore. Move to the nearest ruin, see, exhausting 1 item per move. So, okay, there it is. It is right there in explore. It's just never repeated after that. And there's a little more detail like I just told you about. Then exhaust 1 item to take an item from that ruin. So super simple. You're gonna go get more, you're gonna wish for more wishes, as one of my friends says. Next up, quest. Move to the nearest clearing matching the quest. Then exhaust any 2 items to discard the quest and score 1 victory point. You're gonna ignore the card text. They will never draw cards. They won't have growing point potential. It's just 1 victory point, sort of like crafting items. It's only ever worth 1. You don't have to worry about what items you have. You just have to be able to exhaust 2 of them to get 1 victory point. Then replace the quest. Easy peasy. Next up, aid. Target the player in your clearing with any items and the least victory points among those players. So critically, this is the one action that is, that's not true. It's the one action that targets clearings that you don't actually move to. So you will never have the bot go seek someone out in order to aid them. They have to be in the clearing, which I think is interesting. It makes for an interesting situation because being in the clearing of the Vagabot is dangerous. However, you need to be in the clearing with them sometimes if you want to be aided by them. So if you have a player in the clearing and has items in their supply, so they've crafted items, the bot will exhaust as many items as possible up to the number of items that player has. Take that many items from them and score that many victory points. Then they draw that many cards. So if someone's been crafting away, but they're still in last place or they're low in the victory points, so they have 5 items. And, if it's a mouse day, so the Vagabot quested, went to that clearing, did their quest, and then had 4 other items unexhausted and ready to go. they would exhaust each of those 4 items, take 4 items from that player, and then they would score 4 victory points, and the player they took the items from would draw that many cards. If that player was a bot themselves, they would just score 4 victory points. So they will just get as many as they can, and know in that case they got new items which are available to use for the rest of daylight. They can't immediately exhaust one of them to get that 5th item from supply. And all but one action here is a one-time use. Even if you draw another quest card that matches the clearing that you just went to, you don't get to do another quest. Even if you get more items to further aid someone, you don't get to aid them again. So that's how the bot uses aid. And speaking of the one action that can happen multiple times, battle. Move to the nearest clearing with any pieces of the enemy with the most victory points. Sometimes the bot will move a substantial distance here, meaning sometimes they don't have very many items to use for battle when they get there. Then exhaust 1 item to battle that player. Score 1 victory point per enemy warrior removed. Repeat this action, exhausting 2 items per extra battle as many times as possible. There's a few things to take into account here. First of all, it's like the Vagabot already, it just always has infamy, triggered for all factions, because they get 1 victory point for warriors. They already get victory points for, they don't get like bonus victory points with the infamy plus the cardboard. They get 1 victory point for warrior, and then the normal 1 victory point per cardboard. So they're scoring points for everything that they take out in battle. Then repeat this action. So this is a little bit confusing, but in the law of rootbotics, it's very clear. This does not include moving. So if they battle and there are more pieces or tokens or warriors in that clearing, and they have two items to exhaust, because the initial battle takes 1, but every extra battle takes 2. If there are more things to actually remove in battle, it will exhaust 2 items and do it again. So if it finds, the Vagabot finds its way to a kind of a big, a populous clearing of the player with the most victory points, it could churn through all of its items and just keep battling until either it has been rendered useless by the things being damaged and it doesn't have any more items to spend, or it just churns through everything in that clearing, wood and cardboard, and there's nothing left. So battle can sometimes be pretty gruesome, especially later on in the game when it's dealing the extra hit and all that. All right, so then it has a little tiebreaker down there. If target defender is in multiple clearings at equal distance, so a tie for closest, then move to the clearing wherever they have the most buildings and tokens, then fewest warriors. So there you go. If there's only, if there isn't a tie between closest clearing of the player with most victory points having pieces there, then you go to that one. But if there are 2 or 3 or however many up for grabs, follow those tiebreakers. Next up, repair. The last 2 are very simple. If you have any damaged items, exhaust 1 item to repair 1 damaged item, unexhausted before exhausted. So by the same token that they will push exhausted items to damaged first, they will repair unexhausted items first. So they will do both of them in the way that benefits them most. So they'll get rid of the ones they've already used, and they will get back the ones that they can use at that point, whenever possible. If they're all exhausted, so be it. They'll take 1, and it's at least out of their damaged area. Now, when you do that, remember to double check your battle track, because sometimes pulling a damaged item back means you have your 6th, 9th, or 12th item ready to go back up to the track. Then last action for daylight, special. Exhaust 1 item to take the action on your character card. Skip this action if it would have no effect. So there you go. The things we talked about before. In the future, there may be more of those for me to talk about. Whatever it says, you do that when it says special. And then that's daylight. That's the end of what's going on there. So we move into evening. So first up, if you have any damaged items, refresh 4 undamaged items. So flipping them over if they're in your satchel, not in your damage box. If you have no damaged items, refresh 6 instead. So, you know, preemptive strike on my video to talk about how to face the bots. Keeping 1 damaged item down here does a lot, as it prevents them from refreshing 2 items per turn. So as long as you can keep an item damaged at all times, at least 1 on the Vagabot, that's a good thing to do. Second, if you were in a forest, repair all items. If not, repair 1 item. Repair unexhausted items before exhausted, same as before. So this coincides with slip up in Birdsong. So if the Vagabot woke up and you know, when the birdies are making their music and they have 2 or fewer undamaged items, they go, this is very bad, beep boop, and they go to the forest. They skip daylight, they come down here to evening, they refresh those items if they aren't refreshed already, and then they repair all their items. Remember, exhausted, unexhausted, they maintain, they just get pushed up to their satchel. And since at that point they've already missed their the part where they unexhaust their items, just because they do that, they slip into the forest to get their items back, does not necessarily mean next turn is going to be this huge like banner experience, because if they're all exhausted, there won't be much to do. However, now you may understand why the Ranger is as powerful as they are with their hideout ability. Because normally you only check here at Birdsong before you've done daylight. But with the Ranger, you know, and you only get special in Fox or Rabbit. But in both of those, you have battle as part of your day actions. And when it checks, it doesn't check to see if you have 2 or fewer undamaged items. It checks to see if you have 3 or more damaged items. So it both happens at a better time because you've already taken actions, you don't skip daylight, and it's more permissive. It's kind of, especially when it builds up a bunch of items later on, it's pretty hard to get to 2 or fewer undamaged items. But getting 3 or more damaged items, that's not bad at all. That could just have taken 1 bad beat during 1 battle action that turn, and they get to slip into forest here at special and immediately get all their items back. So the Ranger is just going to stay more, you know, ready more often than the regular Vagabot, and that's what makes it difficult. And last but not least, discard your order card. So simple. We've seen that time and time again. So before I get to the cards, as always, we are going to go over the table and I'll show you the example turn out of the Law of Rootbotics to just demonstrate some of these things taking place. And then we'll come back. We'll talk about the difficulty and the trait cards. All right, welcome to the table, where we're going to see the Vagabot's example turn. And over here, boop, we have the Vagabot board. And just a quick note about a couple of things. Way more detail oriented than I have any need to be on this. The character card, remember we have the 3 different characters right now, is not designated because, spoiler, they won't actually use the special action, so it's immaterial. So you could imagine that this is any one of these 3 because it won't really matter. Also, for the 5 starting items, there's, as far as I can tell, 1 typo in this example. In the second sentence, it says, at this point, he has 6 items. That's not true. They will be getting their 6th item very soon, but at the outset of this round, they have 5. That's what the image shows on the page. That's what the steps of this example turn also demonstrate. So again, very, very small typo, but that's kind of, it makes a big difference in order to show some of these functions that the example turn will have. Also, of the items, and this is maybe like the height of, well, I really paid close attention to the details. There are 3 starting items and 2 ruin items. That's not shown to be that way on the example turn. However, on the map, it does show that these 2 ruins are exposed. And given the fact that it's playing against cats and birds, the Vagabond is the only one who can affect those ruins. So I took the liberty to say they already pulled boots and a bag from the ruins, and there we go. Now it's time to start. So after a few rounds of play, it's the Vagabot's turn. At this point, he has not 6, but 5 items. That's important, as we will see in just a second. Remember, all items for this bot are treated as identical, so it doesn't matter if one happens to be a boot or a sword. For clarity, this example illustration does not show items being exhausted as the Vagabot takes actions. All right, so I made a small adjustment. I scooted the Vagabot board in a little bit. So I know it just said that it does not show items being exhausted, but I figure since this is a moving medium, I might as well take advantage of that. And I will show you, instead of taking pictures of like states of the board, I will show you flipping over items for things taking place so you can track that. So let's continue. The order card is a bird card. The Vagabot will craft its item. Since it has an item down here, and there are swords over here, so it does craft the sword, which means it gets 1 victory point. Again, even though it says 2 here, the bots only ever get 1 for crafting items. And we put the order card in the special order card slot. Normally, the item would go into the satchel, but because this is the Vagabot's 6th item, see, that typo is immediately relevant. It's placed on the leftmost place of the battle track. This item cannot be exhausted, but it will increase the bot's maximum hits to 2. Finally, as the Vagabot has plenty of undamaged items, he won't need to slip. He scores 1 point for crafting the item. There we go. And a quick note, we talked about this in the how to actually play the Vagabot. If he already had an exhausted item in here, when this item came in, he would place that exhausted item first. So just a heads up, but they were all unexhausted, so it doesn't really matter because remember, the type of item is immaterial. Now it's time for daylight. The order card is bird, so the bot will take the following actions: explore, quest, aid, and battle. Each time an action is taken, the Vagabot must exhaust at least 1 item. The Vagabot will continue taking actions until it takes all 4 actions or has exhausted all of its items. First, he explores the nearest ruin. This requires that he move to the fox clearing, and the example page says this is clearing 11. He is in clearing 11, so it means clearing 12, as this is the nearest clearing with a ruin. Whoop! So he has to exhaust an item to make that move. He exhausts a second item to explore the ruin. And we remove that, and we take the sword beneath it. Now that sword comes into play unexhausted and ready to go. This is his 7th item, so it's placed in his satchel, and he has 4 items left. Next, he quests. I should show you, I haven't shown you before. This is the quest that he had up before. I guess I can leave it here so you can actually see. Though it will be taken care of shortly. So he exhausts an item to move south to the mouse clearing. So this is, there's actually 3 mouse clearings that are tied for, closeness. They're 1 space away. However, clearing 11, 9, 7, this is the high priority. So he exhausts an item to go there. Then he exhausts 2 more items. Oops, and remember, they don't have to be of any certain type. They just need to have 2 of them. He scores 1 point. And he has 1 unexhausted item left. It doesn't say this, but he would at this point draw a new mission or a quest, and he puts it right there. The third action is aid. the Vagabot exhausts his last item to aid. The clearing contains both Eerie and Marquise. Only the Marquise has crafted an item, so only she can be aided. This is different from the human Vagabond, it points out, which is true. Sometimes you can aid someone, even if they don't have items, just so you can gain those points. That's not the case with Vagabond. It will only aid if it's going to get something out of it. That's not just points. So, the Vagabond takes the item from the Marquise. This is its 8th item, so it's one more and it would go up to its battle track, but for now it just goes into the satchel, and it gets 1 point for aiding. The Marquise draws a card for her trouble. Because he got another item, he can keep taking actions. Now, this is an important point. Had the Marquise another item that they had crafted, yes, the Vagabot has another item here, so it would give it more chance to take actions. However, the aid action has already been taken. So at the time, it only had one item to spend in order to aid. So that's it. The aid is now left behind. However, we still have battle left in the day. So let's check that out. The 4th action is battle. The Vagabot exhausts its final item to battle in its clearing. The Marquise has the most victory points there, so they are the defender. Let's see. Oh, look at that. The roll is a pair of 3s, which is bad luck. 2 Marquise warriors are removed because the item in the battle track means the Vagabot's maximum hits is 2. So it doesn't even get the full strength of that 3 that it rolled. Netting the Vagabot 2 points. Boop, boop. Because remember, it's like they already have, they've gone aggro on all the different forces, so the infamy track is already in place. But the bot must damage 3 items. There were 3 cats, so they get to take advantage of the 3 rolls. This brings the bot down to 5 undamaged items because 1, 2, 3. Doesn't matter which ones, obviously. Had there been any unexhausted items, the bot would retain those up there and put exhausted items first, but all of their items were exhausted, so it doesn't really matter. So since they only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items in the satchel and the battle track, this brings the sword down out of the battle track and it goes into the satchel. Now, an important point here, had, if there was one other unexhausted item, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and this comes down out of the battle track, this would now allow the Vagabot to repeat the battle action, because it takes 2 items to repeat it. It only takes 1 to initiate it. So it wouldn't be a great move. I mean, all it needs is 1 hit to take on the cats here, but that is not the case because there was not an unexhausted item for it to use. Now it's time for evening. Since the bot has at least 1 damaged item, it only refreshes 4 items. And one final part, this isn't really a typo, it's just an omission. Part of evening that I have forgotten personally a number of times is the repair thing. Now obviously if the bot ends in a forest because it slipped at the beginning of its turn, or it's the ranger, so it slipped during its special action, then that's pretty easy. That is when everything is going to get repaired. However, it will always repair 1 item, at least 1. If it's in a clearing with enemy combatants and everything, it will repair 1 item. When you repair, you retain whatever face it's on, exhausted or unexhausted, but it will have 1 extra item next time. So at the end of the turn, we would actually repair that item and that would go up to the battle track. So that's actually a kind of a clutch move. Going into the other 2 factions' turns, the bot just barely bumped its maximum hits back up to 2, and with an unexhausted item to boot. That is a boot, haha. So it's not affecting its action economy next turn, but it is going to more kind of strongly defend itself up to and including next turn. So that is the Vagabot's turn. Started down here at 6, it got up to 11 points, so not a bad one for the early part of the game. All right, we're back. First up, we're going to talk about our difficulty cards. As always, the board is normal, is the standard difficulty, but if you want to go easier, you can use the easy card. And it says, in evening, refresh 1 fewer item. So if you have no damaged items, you're going to only refresh 5, not 6. If you have any damaged items, you'll only refresh 3, not 4. Next up, challenging. In evening, refresh 1 more item. So the same thing, but the opposite. So no undamaged items gets you 7 items refreshed. And if you have 1 or more damaged items, you still get to refresh 5. So definitely more challenging. Exactly what it says on the tin. And then, as always, Nightmare is the same as challenging, except you additionally score 1 victory point at the end of evening. So remember, these are the normal difficulty cards. They are in addition to the character cards, which are kind of grouped into, and I imagine when we get new ones, they will also have labels assigned to them of difficulty. So you have kind of 2 ways to change difficulty. One of them is just pure difficulty. One of them is the character. And then, as always, the trait cards are also, they're never bad. They're additional functionality that, in a sense, adds more difficulty just in a different way. So like before, I've ordered these into my most to least favorite traits. So let's get it started. Berserker. Whenever you battle, instead, move to the nearest clearing with the most pieces and target the player with the most pieces there. In evening, repair 1 more item. So no longer are you going to the nearest clearing for the player with the most victory points. You are just looking for the biggest battle. And when you get to that clearing, because it is specifically targeting not just proximity, but specifically going after the biggest group of warriors, or biggest group of pieces, I should say, there's going to be a better than average chance there will be material enough to churn through 1, 2, 3 battle actions, and then it gets to repair 1 extra item in the evening. So I really like Berserker. It's a good threat to have on the table for those like big warrior militant factions, because it's just there to knock you down a peg. When you make a big, huge ball of warriors, you got to know that if you're the biggest ball in the woodland, you're going to have a big old target on your back. Helper, my second favorite. Whenever you aid, score 1 extra victory point, and the aided player draws 2 cards instead of 1. So this is just kind of, it's like, instead of like mutually assured destruction, it's like mutually assured help, assistance. The bot gets 2 points, which if it's playing with the bot, they just both go up by 2 instead of by 1. But if you're playing with the player, they get 2 cards instead of 1. So I think it's just kind of nice. Honestly, I think Berserker is my favorite of them, and the other ones are down a little ways. Before I used to have like 2 or 3 that were like pretty close to the top, and then 1 that's at the bottom. This is kind of the opposite. I like Berserker a lot, and the other ones are further down. Speaking of which, bronze medal for Adventurer, you can battle no more than once per turn. However, at the end of daylight, repeat quest as many times as possible. So kind of a total shift from the strategy of the Vagabot, where you can't do the multiple battle, but you can keep doing quests. Problem is, questing is pretty underpowered for the Vagabot. So this is like, I said that all traits are good for the bot. This one kind of isn't. The bot has a lot more capability of scoring points in battle than it does quests, because it will move to that clearing, spending an item per move, and it has to exhaust 2 items to score 1 victory point, which, I mean, if you compare to battle, you can exhaust 1 item to potentially score 4 victory points if you are all the way up on the battle track. And yes, battle takes damage, and it's just a totally different Vagabot you're going to face with this one. But just know, if you're looking for power level and what to anticipate, this will make it a lower scoring bot. It's just how it is. But I actually like one slightly. Actually, I may have goofed. I think I like Adventurer the least. So this one gets runner up. So actual bronze medal to Marksman. They're pretty close. It's not like a wide margin between them. At the start of battle, as attacker, deal an immediate hit, scoring a point if you remove an enemy warrior. Just reminding you that, in battle, the Vagabot scores points for everything. Same thing with the Marksman, beginning of battle, extra hit. So it's, it can be pretty nice. It makes a big difference. Like if there's one warrior protecting 2 buildings at the beginning of battle, boop, you take care of that one warrior, and now you have 2 unprotected buildings. So it sets up some good plays for the bot. It's just kind of obnoxious. But I do like it better than Adventurer, because Adventurer is essentially like an additional way to put the bot on easy mode, so to speak. And that's the Vagabot. Again, it's kind of word heavy to get all these rules in on this board. I do like the Vagabot for the same reason that I personally do like having the Vagabond in the games. I know that there are ways you can kind of play it in gross ways as a human, and just like degenerate strategies that you can use, but it brings a different like flavor to the game when a Vagabond or Vagabot is in it, as opposed to when they're not. It gives a meaning for crafting items beyond just scoring points and clearing up ruins. It's just sort of this like X factor running around the map. And when it's a Vagabot, I really like, because it's just this other force that's walking around. It's not one player who's playing a totally different game. It's almost like, they could have made Root with this mainline. They could have said, okay, we're only doing army factions and insurgent factions, but in all games you're going to have this one little raccoon running around the woods doing stuff, interacting with you. This could have been in base Root, like the Vagabot as is, because it just sort of like puts a series of wrinkles into the match that otherwise wouldn't be there. And honestly, it doesn't feel that different from having a human Vagabond, aside from, like I said, you're not going to see any like really degenerate strategies that are happening because a human knows what it can and can't do. It's just a little, force of nature going on its own. So it said, once you get to know the actions, this one is also pretty easy to pilot, and I think it's fun to have running around the woodland. So there you go. You can use that, and it can be the second Vagabond. You could have a Vagabond and Vagabot in the same game, in which case definitely make sure you randomize your ruins. But yeah, you can have fun with that and see who's better, the robot or the meat bag, at being vagabondish. Boy, beef that one. Anyways, thanks for taking a pause with Give Pause. Next time I see you on this channel or on this series, we will be talking about new factions, Clockwork Expansion 2, which I'm very excited about. So, see you then. Have a great day, everybody.